Good morning, YouTube. It's a beautiful morning here in northern Nevada. I'm out here in the fishing truck, all loaded up, about to take you guys out fishing. Now, I just want to make this video because I get a ton of questions about where I fish, how I catch fish, how to fly fish, what I can use to catch fish on a spin rod. And I noticed that a lot of videos out there on YouTube, especially after teaching myself how to fly fish, can tend to make things a little overcomplicated. And there's a lack of videos of fishing here in northern Nevada, out here in some of the rural places. So I'm going to make this video as simple as possible and hopefully show you guys some techniques that you didn't already know, and hopefully you guys enjoy watching me catch fish. So let me know in the comments if I didn't go over anything good enough, or if you guys need some more explanation on everything. So hopefully you enjoy. Alright, here we are at the creek. Let's see if we can't find some fish out here. So I'm next to the creek I'm going to be fishing, and as you can see, it's pretty overgrown and it's very small. Now, it can be tough to fly cast with all this brush, so a lot of times I end up high sticking the fly line, which I'll demonstrate later, and it's tough to make a cast with a very large leader. So I'm going to show you guys how to set up a fly rod, just my preferences of how to set up a fly rod to fish these overgrown small creek conditions. Now, to start out, this is the fly line here, this thick rubbery type line, and it's what gives weight to allow you to cast the super lightweight flies. And this isn't what you're going to tie your fly to, because this would spook a trout if it saw this tied directly to a fly. So how I like to set this up is I like to fish tapered leader, and as you can see, my fly line has what's called a welded loop here. Now, not all fly line is going to have that. A lot of fly line will just be cut off flush at the end. Like, let's say you bought a $49 package deal from Walmart, so your fly line coming out of there will probably just be cut straight off at the end without a welded loop. And most leaders actually come with a pre-tied loop, perfection loop at the end there, which I can then do a loop-to-loop connection, and that's super easy to figure out. But since it didn't come with that, I tied a clinch knot, which I'll demonstrate a little bit later. But as you can see, there's a clinch knot right there holding this line to my fly line. Now, you can go straight through without a tapered leader and just put on 4-pound fluorocarbon, which is typically around 5X fluorocarbon tippet, or 4-pound fluorocarbon fishing line, or even monofilament fishing line for that matter. It doesn't really matter in this particular case, because we're not fishing super spooky fish. We're not fishing really big stream that has tons of different currents. This is going to be a lot of high sticking and really short casts. So I'll show you guys how to set this up for the first tutorial here. And when this comes out of the package, it's oftentimes really curled up. And the easiest way to do it, I wish I had one in the package so I could show you guys, but when it comes out, it's going to be real curled up, and the butt section, the thicker end, will be looped around itself multiple times. So it's better to start there and just slowly unloop it little by little, so that way you don't try and pull it all apart at once and leave yourself with a big mess of knots. So this has already been out of the package. I've already used it, but since it was on the reel for a while, I got to go ahead and run it through my hands to help straighten it out. As you see, when I run it through my hands, it kind of rests in a little more of a consistent straight line instead of being so looped up. All right, so now that I have this straightened out, let's say I just took it out of the package, and because I have some damage done right here to my fly line, I'm just going to go ahead and show you what it would look like if you needed to attach this leader, tapered leader, directly to a fly line that you didn't already have a welded loop. So I just have some scissors right here, and I'll go ahead and cut my expensive fly line off at the welded loop section so I can show you how to attach this tapered leader. Go ahead and put that in my pocket so I'm not littering. Now I can show you guys exactly how to attach this tapered leader. Super simple. This knot is called the Albright knot. The larger line is going to be folded over in half, just like this. And I'll just leave myself a little bit to pull on right there. Not too much. I don't want to eat up a lot of fly line. And this is a situation for, this is a knot you want to use if you just got your fly rod out of the box, you haven't had a time to affix a loop to this end, or it didn't come with a welded loop. So you're out here and you gotta figure out how to attach your leader, or your tapered leader, or your straight through mono or fluorocarbon or nylon line to the end of this fly line. So I'll just come through this hole with my tapered leader, bring it down a ways, and as it lays in there nice and flat like that, you can see how this line kind of runs along there. There's another knot besides this Albright knot that I can use. It's called a nail knot, but I don't have a nail on me, or I also don't have like a piece of wire or something I could use to add stiffness to that knot to tie it. So I just loop around, and I just want to spin this fly line or this leader around the fly line multiple times. If you see it in a book, it would probably tell you to run this about 10 times or so. But because I don't want to waste too much of my 7-foot leader, I can very easily, kind of came apart here, hold on. All right, I can very easily get away with maybe 5 wraps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so we're wrapped around there 5 times. Let's go 6 just because I have some extra. And as you can see, this guy's poking out over the top of the fly line. So I also want my running end here, my working end, to come out the top of the fly line also, so that way they're laying side by side, just like that. And now I have my wraps down here. I want everything to lay kind of flat as I cinch this up. So there's that. As as you can see, we got the running end and then the working end, the tag end, side by side. And I just work it up, careful not to go over the edge before you cinch it down too tight. But you have a loop right here at the end, and you're just gonna suck your wraps right up to the end of that loop so it clinches down. You clinch it right up there to the end. Okay, so now you can see I have a very sturdy knot holding my leader to my fly line, and that's without a loop-to-loop connection. I didn't have to build a loop on my fly line or on my leader. And it can also be done with, like I said, straight through one size of monofilament fluorocarbon nylon. Just kind of depends on what you're fishing. Keep in mind, fluorocarbon, put that in my pocket, fluorocarbon has the closest refraction index to water, so that will be the most I guess invisible, if you will, bit of tippet to use when fishing these clear water fisheries. Okay, so now that that's attached, I'm just gonna go ahead, work my way down to the end of this tapered leader. And you can see I had something tied on there. I actually had a surgeon's knot holding another piece of tippet onto my tapered leader, so that way as I cut into and tie on new flies, I'm cutting into the tippet before I get to the leader. But for simplicity's sake, I'm just gonna take these little clippers and cut that tiny little knot off there, and I'm gonna show you guys that you can actually just fish right off the tapered leader. These tapered leaders I actually got at Walmart because I haven't been able to travel around much and get the tapered leaders I usually fish. So for fly selection, these are a lot of subsurface aquatic insects right here, and a lot of them are larva stage or pupa stage and larva stage of flying insects, which the trout eat mainly subsurface aquatic insect larvae. They will rise to dry flies when the conditions are correct, and emerging. Emerging is just when these guys float up to the surface and you know, pop out of their shell and sprout wings. They will eat those when the conditions are correct, like in the early morning or evening when the water temperature is just right and a hatch starts. And that's why people think when they see the fish rising that that's the only time they're biting. But in a stream like this, they'll be in a feeding lie all day long and feeding very opportunistically on anything that looks like a small insect or aquatic insect that's floating by. They'll go ahead and grab it if it's floating by correctly and looks like a small insect. And this is one of my favorite flies right here for northern Nevada, and a lot of the trout fishing I've done has been with this guy right here. This is a black hare's ear with gold bead head nymph. Every time I run into him in a fly shop, I stock up on a bunch of them because I catch the majority of my fish on this guy. And you can tell I was already fishing with it. There's a little bit of knot left on there. Now to affix this guy to the end of my tapered leader, I'll go through the eyelet there. And I'll just do a clinch knot. I like the simple clinch knot. You run it through so your line's side by side. And now I'm just gonna wrap this line around 5 times. 2, 3, 4, 5. This works really good for these small flies. It's not hard to tie. I'll just hold that right next to the fly there, my tag end. Just pinch him right down next to the fly. Boom. A lot of times you want to wet your knots. Especially if you're using really small tippet, it can burn the leader line when you're cinching it down. But in this case, I got 5X, 4 pounds, pretty thick, and I didn't pull it very far, so that seems like a pretty sturdy knot. And I can hold the fly and pull on that sucker, and I got definitely 4 pounds before it breaks. And now I just have a small little piece to cut off here, and I'll leave a little tag end. Some people leave more than others, and some people will say that it can spook the fish. And in this fast of water, I think this will go right in front of a fish's face and be very hard to distinguish the difference between this and actual insect, and should give me a take. So now I'm ready to fish. After that rig up tutorial, I started heading upstream because that's how you'd like to fish it, since the fish are generally pointed upstream towards the current, feeding and the stuff coming down. It gives you kind of a chance to sneak up on fish. And back behind me there was a little section here where I didn't see any fish today right off the bat, and all I'm using is polarized sunglasses, which kind of gives me a chance to see down into the water a little better and see if I'm working with any fish. So now I've come upstream to this little man-made pool here, and this pool appears to have some fish pointed upstream there, right behind that white water. Now there's also going to be some fish underneath that white water as well, but it's hard for me to see them, and it's hard for them to see me as well, but it's hard for me to tell if they're under there or not. I always like to blind cast into the white water though, because, and what I'll do is I'll show you guys later what's going on under there. There'll be fish just below that in the slightly less aggressive current feeding under there. Now I'm gonna make a cast into this pool with that setup I showed you guys at the beginning there. And we'll see, I'm just gonna dead drift it back towards me, and we'll see if we get any fish willing to make a take on this. Now, short leader, I'm doing a very short leader right now, so I don't have a lot of casting room before my fly line gets over top of them fish. But I can just make little casts towards that corner, slowly working my fly up to them fish. I'm watching the tip for any sign of a fish take. I'm watching the end of my fly line as well. And I'm just ever so gently flicking this fly out into this pool that you see here in front of me. I need to get a little further cast. Okay. Right out towards the edge of that white water. That's a take and a fish. All right, took me a few casts to get it right in the right spot. Where this fish thought it was a real insect drifting past. I'm just playing them on the reel a little bit, bringing them in slowly. I'm gonna land them. You like to land trout relatively quickly because when they get tired out and they build up a lot of lactic acid, it can be deadly for them. So there it is, first fish of the day. A couple little casts in, and got a decent 10-12 inch rainbow trout on. That fly has just barely hooked him there, right in the corner of the mouth. Now to get that fly out, you can just use regular needle nose pliers as long as you have fairly small pliers. But I like to use these forceps. They got a little curve to them, so I can also reach in there alongside the fish's mouth, and I just shake that fly right out. Came out super easy. The fish is still in the water. We've got plenty of fight left in them. Didn't play him too long until I got him in the net. Like to use a rubberized net so it doesn't wipe off too much of their protective slime. A lot of people don't like trout, say they feel really slimy, but that protective slime that coats the sides of their body actually does a lot to protect them against parasites, and also makes them very hydrodynamic in the water, so that way they have to work a lot less to stay in one place in the fast water. So my hand's wet, and I'm gonna go ahead and release this guy back into the pool he was in. Maybe pull him out of the water for just a second to show you guys the size and the colors on this fish. But back into the pool we go. Just gotta get past this brush right here. Okay, here he is. Here's a look at him in the light. We'll just let him swim right back into the pool where he came from. Now remember, if you're catching and releasing trout, you don't want to gill hook them. You want to handle them as little as possible. Try not to squeeze them too hard. They say that even if a trout swims away, oftentimes it can even have a heart attack after the stress of being caught. So we try to minimize the fatalities as little as possible, so that way this fish can still be out here for you guys to catch when you come out. I'll just do one more cast with the fly line so you guys can see in real time how it's catching fish, how quickly and effectively it is at catching fish, and then I'll switch over to the spin rod so you can see some of the techniques I would use if I was spin fishing this. All right, so let's give it another short little cast. I'm liking that spot right there, right on the tail out of that whitewater. I can see several fish in feeding lies, and with my polarized glasses I can see them kind of moving side to side, adjusting to insects coming down out of that culvert there. All right, so here's another cast with that same little beadhead nymph I was using. Didn't quite get it close enough. Fish just jumped for something there. I can't quite say if it was my little fly or not. I want to take up this fly line as it comes back towards me, so I have a taunt. There's a fish. Oh, missed him. You see the fly line kind of makes S turns, kind of bends up on the water, and that just shows you all the different currents I'm contending with to try and make this seem like a legitimate insect in the water. Each one of these little micro drifts that is occurring can cause my fly to get pulled right past a fish at an unnatural speed. and make them think it's in fact not a real insect. Alrighty. Just want to keep it. And what would be even better is having just a touch longer leader in this pool to make sure that I can hold the green fly line further off the surface, creating less micro drifting. But like I said, for the small brushy pockets, it'll be much easier. That's a fish. Oop, lost him. Another fish. Lost him too. Using these small flies, debarbed hooks, sometimes it can be very difficult to keep a fish on. Mending the fly line is just kind of laying over my fly line to be in a more natural drift in the same current, so I don't experience as much micro drifting. That's a good spot right there. Very natural. That's a fish. So we got another fish on. Reel them up here. I can reel these fish in fairly quickly with the 4-pound. I won't break off quite as easy. If I was using any lighter leader, it might very easily break off trying to pull these fish in quickly. So this guy here, kind of a different fish. It's a hybrid between a brook trout and a brown trout, known as tiger trout. Call it the Nevada tiger. The hook set right there in the corner of his mouth, and I can just shake that out. Set my fly off to the side with these hemostats. All right, so he's got tons of life left in him. Let's get him back into his feeding lie. He's probably gonna shelter for a while before he begins feeding again. But here's a quick look at that Nevada tiger. Back in the water he goes. He's off. He'll be there for you guys to catch when you come out here fishing. Now let's switch over to the spin rod. I'll give a quick tutorial on that and show you guys how to catch some fish here in this fast moving water on the spin rod. So here's the spin rod setup I have. It's a little longer, cost effective Shakespeare Wild Series combo. Doesn't cost too much. And I have like some greenish colored monofilament line on there. So how I would fish this spin rod is I'll take this 5X tippet, which I've been talking about 5X a lot. That's 4.5 pounds with this Walmart brand tippet. Now I don't usually use Walmart brand tippet. I like Rio. I like Scientific Angler, but this stuff works just as good. And if all you have near you is a Walmart, which I noticed out west, the Walmarts will typically carry some fly fishing tackle. And I think it's a great thing to add to your tackle box, even if you're not serious about getting into fly fishing, or you know, you just can't give up the spin rod just yet. I think adding this to your tackle box is going to be very effective when fished correctly on a spin rod as well. So because I have this thick green, I don't know, it's probably 8-pound test. I can't even remember the company of line it is, but it's just monofilament, probably 8-pound test. I'm gonna go ahead and join about a 2 foot, I'll say 2 foot length of this 5X tippet to my monofilament. Having these little clippers is very handy. I keep those easy to reach right there on my vest. They're also sold at Walmart, pretty cost effective as well. Now, this might be tough to see, but I have 2 pieces of line running side by side. One is the green, larger line. The other one is the 5X tippet, 4.5-pound test, clear, which is gonna look a lot better in this crystal clear stream. So I line them up, parallel, side by side, whatever you wanna call it, and I'll be tying a surgeon's knot. So here we go. Side by side, flip them around into a loop-de-loop. Just a little loop-de-loop. Pinch that loop-de-loop off where you can have easy access to both of these loops side by side. You're going to want to thread through them together. Now, since I crossed over the top, I'm going to come around behind, poke the end of the line side through the hole, and I'll repeat it 3 times. So end of the line side. It's kind of tough here to get that poked up through. The line has a little memory, but it's all right. Poke it up through. 1, 2, 3. There you go, simple as that. This I'm gonna wet because these will create a little bit of friction as I rub them past each other to cinch this down. So go ahead and wet that in my mouth. Nothing crazy. And tighten that down. And I'll just go ahead and pull on the tag ends also separately, all of them. Pull from all directions just to get that knot good and seated. All right, so as you can tell, very small knot, nicely seated up there. I'll go ahead and pop my tag ends off. Try not to throw those on the ground, put them in my pocket. Boom, there we go. So now we have a nice and visible kind of seamless transition from green, little knot, to a thin clear. From here, this is a little secret I learned just before I started to get into fly fishing, is these water bobbers. They have I don't know, a little rubber band inside there. Twist that around, fill it up with some water. It's clear, won't cast too much of a shadow or run the end of my line through there. I want this pointed back towards the fly rod. Just kind of reduces friction if I'm reeling it back towards me, make a little less disturbance in the water. And I'm gonna let that drop and it'll slide on up. Now I'm gonna fly fish with my spin rod, with that water bobber. I could fish the same small fly, but I might want to go just a little heavier with this. I don't know. The fish might be a little more aggressive. Maybe I can fish it a little deeper in the pool, but they might be a little happier to see this large fly. Now just remember, these are aquatic midge or insect larvae that has broken loose and is just floating aimlessly downstream until it hatches into either a mayfly, a caddis, a stonefly, and this will just be a clinch knot right here, just the same. This fly is getting to be a little bit larger size, where you might want to transition to an improvised or an improved clinch knot. But I think this, I'll wet that. I think this will still hold great. But as these little holes here get larger and larger, it's harder for the good old clinch knot to hold on there. I'll just cut my tag end down just a hair with my clippers. I left a little bit on there just to give it some pull against it. Now to lock this guy in place, we've got, I don't know, 2 feet there. Maybe give it just a touch more. I just break this free and keep spinning this until it twists. See the rubber band twisting there? Now the rubber band's twisted up and this guy is stuck in place. If I needed the extra weight, I could fill this thing up with water. But I don't, because I'm not making a big cast. If I was fishing a pond or a lake, I might fill this guy up with water. I might even use a larger size. But this is going to give me the presentation I need for this small stream. And the other thing is, you can fish dry flies, which are flies that imitate grown insects, winged creatures, that land on the surface. And the trout see that from underneath and will come up and take it, thinking it's a flying insect. So I can fish the dry flies with this because it'll lay flat on the water and give me that kind of vertical presentation. But if I was fishing just dry flies on this, I would go with the water bobber. But then if I was fishing just subsurface like this guy, I could go ahead and throw on just a weighted orange foam bobber. See this circular piece of lead down here? That adds some weight to this bobber, and I can actually chuck this out pretty far. And I would just put it in place of this, and then go ahead and have my midge there suspended down, or my nymph, excuse me, my nymph suspended down below this foam bobber. But to keep the presentation very subtle, and this won't be slapping on the water and casting a shadow as it drifts, I'll leave that in the fly vest for today. Might show it to you later if I do another video at some still water like a pond or something larger. I'll show you guys how to fly fish the spin rod. So we're gonna fish this thing just upstream off to the side. Hopefully them fish won't be able to see me very well. And I'm waiting to see that bobber go under, or see a slight tap on the end of the rod, spin rod. If I could just toss that right there and drift it down right into that foam line there. And I need my fly to kind of drop down in just below that bobber to really put it in the strike zone for these fish. There we go. Nice fish on. Oop, there he goes. Bummer. That's how it happens. Very tough to get a proper hook set. Once again, with the spin rod. Okay, straight down into the white water with this guy. Had a little bite. trying to set the hook. And finally, we're hooked up. Try and keep the line tight. I'm gonna go ahead and play around this bush here real fast, just so I can get down on the water. I don't want to tow this guy all the way up that pipe back to where I was standing. So we'll go ahead and reel him up. I just wanted to do this little demo for you guys so you can see just how easy it is to catch fish on a spin rod. So there you have it. Nice little rainbow on a cheap spin rod, hooked just in the upper lip with a fly. Go ahead and just pop that out on him. And we can turn him back right away. So what I'm gonna do now is take the camera and get you guys underwater, just underneath that fast whitewater, so you can see the forces that are work, all the hydrodynamic forces that are at work, bringing food down that culvert from upstream down to those fish.
If you're still watching this far, then you probably remember me saying I was going to demonstrate high sticking the fly rod in some of the small pocket waters in the natural runs of the creek. However, after several attempts of setting up the tripod to record myself in the third person and many spooked fish later, I decided to abandon that idea, and I ended up strapping the GoPro to my chest and just fishing away. I fished the lower portion of that creek for several hours and caught a lot of fish between the two man-made pools and a few fish in the natural runs between the two man-made pools by the culverts. Then after I got bored with that area, I decided to head up to the higher elevations of the creek. There I found that the fish were a lot smaller in size, but appeared to be a wild self-sustaining population with beautiful colorations. Also, I'd just like to note that besides a handful of fish that I caught on the grasshopper pattern dry fly, the rest of the fish that day were caught on the black hare's ear with the gold beadhead nymph. That particular pattern of fly is my go-to, and I fish it in most trout streams in northern Nevada. And I did have to end up adding some 5X tippet to the end of my leader with the surgeon's knot after losing some flies to the brush or snagging them on the creek bottom. But otherwise, I continued to use the same setup I demonstrated in the fly rod rigging tutorial at the beginning of the video. And now that all that classroom stuff is out of the way, just sit back and enjoy watching me set the hook on some beautiful northern Nevada fish.
All right, I'm gonna try and get one more catch before heading back. Got him. These fish look like they are possibly a self-sustaining population. Who knows how long ago they've been planted in here. It was another beautiful day of fishing out here in northern Nevada. I hope you guys enjoyed the video and maybe picked up some useful tips for getting into fly fishing or catching fish in the small stream like this on the spin rod. And keep a lookout for any other videos I might be posting later on, and I'll have some more tips in there, and I'll be fishing some different places. So stay tuned, and I hope you guys enjoyed seeing me catch some fish.